Okay, in the last video that we did problems 1 through 4. So if you're missing those, you need to see them. They are on a separate recording. So we're starting with number 5 today on that county interim assessment packet that we took online, the test we took online a couple weeks ago. Okay, number 5. Fat has more than twice as many calories per gram as carbohydrates and proteins. A gram of fat has about 9 calories, while a gram of carbohydrates or protein has about 4 calories. The expression below represents the number of calories in a food item. Okay, so what I did was I looked at the expression that they gave us, and I tried to figure out, I read the questions and what the responses were, the possibilities, and they're asking like, what does 4 times y plus z represent? So I looked at the whole equation, reread the problem to figure out what went with what, right? So 9, in the problem, a gram of fat has about 9 calories. So x is probably a gram of fat, right? 9 calories times, this would be a gram of fat. So that's what the 9x represents. While a gram of carbohydrate or protein has about 4 calories. And I wrote a 7 there. That's supposed to be a Z. I think I just forgot my tail. So carbs and protein both have 4 calories apiece, right? So 4 would be the calories, 4 calories times carbs plus protein, or protein plus carbs, right? Let's just say y is protein and z is carbs, or it could be vice versa. From the information that we know, we can't tell which is which. What does the term 4 times the quantity of y plus z represent? Okay. Is it A, the number of fats in a food item? No. Nope. B, the number of calories in a food item from fat? Pretty sure that's the same thing as what A said. Nope. The number of grams of carbs and protein in a food item? Nope. The number of calories in a food item from carbs and protein? Yeah. Because it's 4 calories per, right, protein, gram of carbs, gram of protein. Not the number, this is the number of grams of carbs and protein.
What's the point of the 9x?
Well, it's just giving you, if you had carbs, fat, and protein, this is how you would calculate the calories in a food. Okay, like say you have a bowl of spaghetti. Pasta is carbs, meat is protein, fat in the meat also. So if you want to find out how many calories, for every gram of fat, there's 9 calories. For every gram of protein and carbs, there's 4 calories each. So that's how you calculate the whole food. It just wanted to know what the 4 times y plus z represented. That's all it was asking. Does that make sense? Okay. Number 6. The volume of a rectangular prism is 1,200 cubic meters. Let x equals width, x plus 20 equal length, x plus 10 equal height. What is the coefficient of the linear term? Okay. Well, first of all, we're going to have to figure out what the volume of the prism is, and then figure out what the linear term is. Remember, we learned about cubic, quadratic, quintic, linear, constant. So let's figure out what the volume is, and then we'll look and see which term is linear, coefficient, boom. Well, they don't give you the formula for a rectangular prism. That's geometry. You need algebra to do it. We haven't worked with that in here, so hopefully you remember that formula in geometry. So first I'm going to draw my rectangular prism, and it's not going to be perfect. I haven't taught geometry in a long time. It's not too shabby though. Anybody remember the formula for volume of a rectangular prism? Volume equals length times width times height. So basically, they gave us our length, width, and height, right? And they also gave us the actual volume. So when we write that formula out, we'll have a number to plug in for volume, length, and width. So volume equals length times width times height. We know the volume is 1200. The length, width, and height. I'm going to put the width first since it's just a monomial. And then I'll put length and height. So we'll find the equation for this particular prism. We'll get it all multiplied out and set it equal to 0, and then figure out what our linear term is. So what I did was I FOILed this binomial first, and then distributed the x at the end. So first times first is x squared. Outer times outer is plus 10x. Inner times inner is plus 20x. Last times last is plus 200. And then I can combine those like terms in there. So that's x times x squared plus 30x plus 200. And then I'll distribute my x, get rid of my parentheses. So 1,200 equals, what is x times x squared?
X cubed.
X cubed plus x times positive 30x is positive 30x squared. X times positive 200 is positive 200x. And then to find the equation for the box, I need to make sure it's set equal to 0. So I'm going to move that 1,200 over to the other side, which it doesn't have any like terms. So 0 equals x cubed plus 30x squared plus 200x minus 1,200. The question said, what is the coefficient of the linear term? What would that be?
Oh, the
200.
200, right? What's the coefficient of my cubic term? 1, because my cubic term, coefficient 1. Quadratic term, degree of 2, is coefficient of 30. Linear is where x has a exponent of 1, and where your constant does not have a variable. So the linear, the coefficient of the linear term is 200, which is C.
oh, so they literally have like each way.
Yep, and then you just had to know which one was the linear. Okay? Anybody have a question on that one? Okay. Number 7, the height in feet of a javelin t seconds after it is thrown is modeled by the function h of t equals negative 4t squared plus 24t plus 6. After how many seconds does a javelin reach its maximum height of 42? All right, this kind of question is all over the place. ACT, SAT, you probably had it on your algebra EOC, your geometry EOC. You're probably going to have it on your algebra 2 EOC. They love these questions. The function that they gave you, what is that? Quartic, quintic, cubic, quadratic, cubic. What is it? Quadratic, right? Quadratic's a parabola. It either opens up or down. Is this one going to open up or down? Down, because A is negative, right?
Oh, yeah, it is.
Okay, so it's going to be a quadratic. It's going to open down. It tells us that the maximum height is 42 feet, and they want to know when it reaches that maximum height. So I would graph it. We obviously know that our parabola is opening down, right?
Yeah.
If it gave us a maximum of 42, remember that's our y value, right? So our y value must be our height on our y-axis. So our x-axis must be our time. So we got to figure out what time is it at the maximum of 42. Well, isn't that the vertex?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if we could figure out the vertex, that would help us because that would tell us what this x value is. Or if you want to think about it like this, if we solved the quadratic, the solution tells us where it crosses the x-axis, right? So we could also solve, see where it crosses the x-axis, and that'll tell us the same thing as the x value of the vertex. Am I right? And if we get two solutions, well, we know that our x is our time, and we can't have negative time. So if one of them is negative, we know it can only be the positive one, right? So let's just solve it, see what we get, see if it makes sense. So our function, I can use h of t or y, it doesn't matter. But I want to know when it's 0, so I'll just put 0 equals, and that's really not going to affect us because we're just wanting to. Now, I think I can factor this. I could also use the quadratic formula. But if it's factorable, that's what I'm going to try to do. Remember, if we're factoring and there's a GCF, we have to take it out. If you're doing a quadratic formula, don't take out a GCF. You don't have to, but factoring you do. Is there a GCF?
No.
Yes, there
It's
is.
2.
2's a factor. Is it the greatest?
3.
What the heck?
I
No.
don't know.
It's
24.
2.
2.
It's 24 Mr.
But you know what?
I don't know. I'm pretty good.
Didn't they tell us? I already started this problem off wrong. I didn't start it off wrong. Instead of putting a 0 here, didn't they tell us we're looking for t when our y or our height is what? 42. So we should have plugged in a 42 there. My bad. And then get it set equal to 0, and then your GCF is going to be different, which is why I was looking at y'all crazy because I was not thinking right. So let me subtract 42 from both sides. 0 equals negative 4t squared plus 24t, and then 6 minus 42 is negative 36. Now what's the GCF of that? 4. And remember, if it's leading with a negative, if we have a leading negative coefficient, we don't want that, right?
Yeah.
So if we're factoring, let's take that out too. So let's factor out a negative 4. And see what's left. So I'm going to divide each one of those terms by negative 4. Try to cram this in, I don't have much room. So negative 4t squared divided by negative 4 is going to leave me with t squared. Positive 24t divided by negative 4 is negative 6t. And negative 36 divided by negative 4 is positive 9. Now think about it. Remember, we're just looking inside the parentheses now. So A is 1, B is negative 6, and C is 9. So two numbers that multiply together to get A times C, and then add together to get B, negative 6. Any ideas? Negative 3 times is positive 9, and negative 3 plus negative 3 is negative 6. So that works, right? Will we have to do divide and slide? No, because A is 1. The A in parentheses, not your original A. So we have t minus 3 and t minus 3. So if I set now I'm going to set my factors equal to 0. If I set negative 4 equal to 0, is that going to give me a solution? No. These two are the same, so I don't need to set them both equal to 0. So t minus 3 equal to 0. Add 3 to both sides, and t equals 3. Have I found my answer? Yes. When y is 42, t is going to be 3, right? So after how many seconds does the javelin reach its maximum height? 3. Now, if we wanted to know when does it hit the ground, okay, that's going to be where it crosses the x-axis is when it hits the ground. That's when we would want it, when we wouldn't plug that 42 in. We'd leave it 0 to see what the solutions of the equation were. But we wanted to know when y is 42, what is x, okay?
Maybe like 6.
I would think, yeah, makes sense, right? Okay, number 8, when I first was doing this test on my own, I was like, oh gosh, we never did a circular, anything with circles or ellipse or eccentricity or anything like that. We didn't do anything because we don't have to. So I was like, why are they putting this in here? But then once I read it, I was like, we don't have to know anything about a circle or an ellipse or eccentricity. It just wants us to get one of those variables in that formula by itself. Okay? We can do that. So 8 says the eccentricity of an ellipse is the measure of how circular the ellipse is. How circular it is. The eccentricity E can be represented by the equation E equals the quantity of the square root of a squared minus b squared, all divided by a, where a is the length of the major axis of the ellipse and b is the length of the minor axis. Which equation represents the formula in terms of b? So currently the equation is in terms of E, that's what it's isolated. They just want us to rewrite it so that B is isolated. We can do that, right? We know how to undo stuff. So let me write it down. So the first thing I wanted to do was I wanted to clear that fraction. Okay, because I'm trying to get B all by itself. Let's get rid of the fraction first. How could I get rid of divide by A? Multiply every term by A. This division problem, that's one term. So if I just multiply the one term by A, and then E is also a term, so I got to multiply it by A. So A times E is either AE or EA. I'm going to go with AE. Equals, A's canceled. So the square root of a squared minus b squared. How can I undo a radical? Well, how can I undo the square root of something? I can square it, right? So if I square one side, I have to square the other. So AE quantity squared is either a squared e squared, or you could just leave it as AE quantity squared. We'll just have to look at the equation and see how they have it. Equals, only thing I did here was get rid of the radical. So I still have a squared minus b squared. Remember, I'm trying to get b all by itself. So what can I do now?
Subtract a squared.
Could subtract a squared from both sides. And I am going to go ahead, instead of writing that as AE quantity squared, I'm going to write it as a squared e squared. Because I left it like that at first, and when I started looking at my answers, they didn't. So a squared e squared minus a squared equals negative b squared. Now, the first time I did this, I was not getting what they had over in the options, okay? So I was like, okay, well, what can I do differently? At this point right here, a squared e squared is a term and a squared is a term, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do they have a common factor?
Yeah.
What? A squared. So I'm figuring up here when I was looking at their options, I'm like, I bet they factored that out. So if I'm going to do that, if I factor out a squared, what's a squared e squared divided by a squared?
E squared.
E squared. And negative a squared divided by a squared. Minus 1, right? Okay. Now, I'm going to divide everything by this negative. I'm still trying to get everything by its little lonesome. So that'll make that negative a squared. And this is still one term, so I don't want to do every little thing because it's one term. Equals b squared. Is b all by itself yet? Not quite. One more thing I need to do, which is what?
Square root it.
Square root it. And sometimes I do the positive negative square root, but I can see in the problem that they did not do the positive negative square root, so I did not do the positive negative square root. So I have b equals
still had the first a squared. And then you had the second one as negative 1.
Well, I took out an a squared here, right? So a squared divided by a squared cancels and left me with e squared.
Yeah.
In the second term, a squared divided by a squared is 1. There was nothing else with it.
Yeah.
So just 1. This is one term. So a squared, e squared divided by a squared. A squared divided by a squared is 1 e squared, or just e squared, right? That makes sense?
Okay.
Okay. All right, so now square root of b squared is b. Over here, this is when I started trying to see, okay, I need something like they have. So I'm going to leave this negative here for now because none of those a's are negative. What is the square root of a squared? A. And the square root, I'm going to leave the negative for now. E squared minus 1 goes together. So I can't just take the square root of e squared, okay? If there was a exponent on the outside, I'd have a perfect square here, but there's not, okay? So I'm in parentheses, e squared minus 1 is going to have to stay. And does that match any of my problems? No. Okay. What if I distribute this negative? So negative times e squared is negative e squared. Negative times negative 1 is positive 1. Does that match any of my solutions? Which one? C. Right? We have b equals a, same thing, square root. I have e squared as negative, do they? Yeah, I have 1 is positive, do they? Yeah, they just wrote it because they don't like leading coefficients that are negative, and since 1 was positive, they wrote the 1 first minus e squared. So it's the same thing as C.
I still don't understand though why you have the a, negative a squared in front of the e squared minus 1. Because they cancel each other out?
But it was
Oh, here I was just dividing, because negative b squared, what I was doing in this point, if this is what you're talking about, was I was dividing by negative 1. Or are you talking about this a squared at this step?
I mean, they're both there. Like,
Well, ask me when I'm done recording and come up here and show me because I'm not sure what you're saying. Okay? All right, number 9. If a squared minus 1 quantity squared equals a to the 4th plus 1 plus k, what is the value of k? I thought this was a weird question. What I'm gathering is that they're saying, obviously the left side is equal to the right side. There's an equal sign. So what I did was, I did a squared minus 1 times a squared minus 1 and FOILed it out. I wanted to see what I got to see if I could figure out what exactly they were asking me. So I just rewrote this as a squared minus 1 times a squared minus 1, because that's what it means. We know that. Equals a to the 4th plus 1 plus k. What's a squared times a squared?
A
To the 4th. A squared times negative 1 is negative 1a squared, or just negative a squared. Negative 1 times a squared, again, is negative a squared. Negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. So I have a to the 4th, and there minus 2a squared plus 1 equals a to the 4th plus 1 plus k. They want to know what the value of k is. What do you think the value of k is?
2a squared.
oh, wait. That's
Negative 2.
Negative 2a squared, right? Because a to the 4th is that, plus 1 plus 1. So the k must be negative 2a squared. I've never asked y'all a question like that, but we could figure it out, right? Cool beans? Number 10, using the remainder theorem, what is the value of the remainder for the given function? This is a division problem. I taught y'all how to do long division. You may not remember, but you gotta know for the test. I'm going to need more space than what they gave me right here, so I'm going to kind of start up here. So I know I'm dividing by x minus 2. That means x minus 2 is my divisor. And then I have x cubed minus 3x squared plus 7x plus 15. Remember, when you're doing long division of rationals, if you have any missing terms, you have to put in a placeholder. I've got 3 degrees, 2 degrees, 1 degree, 0 degrees, so I wasn't missing any terms. If you don't put it in, everything's not going to line up right, okay? So to start, I go to my divisor, I look at the very first term, and I look at the very first term under the division sign. X times what is x cubed?
X times 3.
X
X
squared, right?
squared.
So that's a quadratic, so I put it above the quadratic term, so everything's got to line up. And then I multiply. X squared times x is x cubed. X squared times negative 2 is negative 2x squared. And then we draw a line and change the signs of all the terms you have there. Not just the first one, but all of them. X cubed minus x cubed cancels. If your first term does not cancel, then you did something wrong. Every time. Negative 3x squared plus 2x squared is negative 1x squared, or just negative x squared. Then that plus 7x, we're going to drop it like a top. And then you start all over again. X times what is negative x squared? What's my sign? So negative x. Multiply all over again. Negative x times x is negative x squared. Negative x times negative 2 is positive 2x. Y'all remember this? Draw a line and change the signs, all of them. X squared plus negative x squared plus x squared should cancel. If it doesn't, something's wrong. Positive 7x minus 2x is 5x. Bring down your positive 15. Again, you want to drop it like it's up. You know this is not the remainder, because if you go up here into your quotient, wherever we started with the terms, you need to have a term above each term to the right of where you started, and our constant does not have a term above it. So we know we're not finished. We gotta multiply all over again. X times what is positive 5x? Positive 5. Multiply. Positive 5 times x is 5x. Positive 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. Draw a line. Change the signs. 5x minus 5x is 0. If it's not, something's wrong. Positive 15 and positive 10 make positive 25. Is there anything else to bring down? No. So this is your remainder. You can write it as a fraction or just remainder 25. Just depends. Is it multiple choice or what? But this question says, what is the value of the remainder? So we only have to say that the remainder is 25. I'm sure that would be the one with the boxes, you know. Far left or far right, 25. Questions on that? Number 11. Consider the expression x cubed minus 3x squared plus 1, quantity divided by x minus 2. Simplified, this expression is equivalent to x squared minus x plus 3 plus a divided by x minus 2. What is the value of a? So they're telling you when you divide this, you're going to get this. So that fraction on the end, the numerator is always the remainder, right? So we're going to have to divide, figure out what the remainder is. Just like we did in number 10, they're just asking it to you in a different way. You have to know that this is where the remainder goes, okay? Now, when we actually divide, we're going to see that what they're telling you is the answer is not actually the answer. So if this question was on your actual test, it would be invalid because this is not the actual answer. However, the remainder is the same as what it is in the answer choices. So it didn't affect the remainder, but you might have been thrown off if you're like, wait, that's not what I got, okay, because they got the wrong thing here. So again, I'm going to divide. And before I do, I can see that my numerator, I'm missing a term because I've got 3 degrees, 2 degrees, 0 degrees. So I'm missing that linear term, so I'm going to have to make sure to put in a placeholder, okay? Don't forget to do that. So x minus 2 divided by x cubed minus 3x squared. Here's where I'm going to add in my placeholder for my linear term, so plus 0x, and then a constant of plus 1. Same thing I just did above. I'm going to divide all over again. X times what's x cubed? X squared. It's going to go, it's a quadratic, it'll go above my quadratic term. You always skip that first term, okay? Multiply x squared times x is x cubed. X squared times negative 2 is negative 2x squared. Draw a line and change the signs. First terms cancel. Negative 3x squared plus 2x squared is negative x squared. That's plus 0x. We will drop it like it's hot. Multiply all over again. X times negative x will give me negative x squared. Multiply, negative x times x is negative x squared, like we said. Negative x times negative 2 is positive 2x. Draw a line and change the signs. Negative x squared plus x squared cancels, so 0. Plus 0x minus 2x is negative 2x. We're not finished yet. We still have another number to drop down. Plus, we still have the open space above the linear term. We've got to have something there. Start all over again. X times what is negative 2x? Will be a negative 2. See how they said it was supposed to be positive 3? It's not. But our remainder still won't change. We'll still get the same remainder. It was a typo, I guess. Alright, negative 2 times x is negative 2x. Negative 2 times negative 2, positive 4. Draw a line. Change the signs. Negative 2x plus 2x is 0. Positive 1 minus 4 is negative 3. So that is what our remainder will be, right? Our answer is x squared minus x minus 2. Either remainder negative 3 or write it as a fraction, which is what they did. And since my remainder is negative, I put minus 3 over the divisor. So that's the A would be what?
3.
Or negative 3 technically, so B. Coolio? How's the bell ring? Oh, we totally have time to get through the next one.
The Summerlin building.
We got time for the next one. Number 12, what value of x satisfies 2x squared minus 4x plus 5 equals 0? They're saying what value of x satisfies that? We have to solve it. We have to solve for x, right? It is a quadratic because the highest degree is 2. We know several ways to solve a quadratic. We can factor, if possible. You can't always solve by factoring, unfortunately. Quadratic formula always will solve a quadratic. Completing the square will always solve a quadratic. But if I can factor, I'm going to try to. I can just look in my head real quick to see if factoring is going to work. So two numbers that multiply to get a times c, that's a positive 10, and add to get b, which is negative 4. Is that going to work?
Yeah.
What gets 10? 10 and 1, 5 and 2. That's it. Will either of those add to get 10? Or I'm sorry, multiply to get 10, add to get negative 4? No. So Wah, wah. So I'm choosing to use a quadratic formula. You can complete the square if you want to, if you remember how to. So quadratic formula, A is 2, B is -4, C is 5. I'm sure you thought by now you were not going to have to hear the quadratic formula song ever again, but guess what? You are. This is one of the few formulas that is actually on the FSA, the one you know a song to. X equals -b plus or minus square root. I'm just doing that for video. B squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Yeah. X equals, what is the opposite of b? Positive 4, because b is -4, double negative makes it a positive. Plus or minus. B squared, I square whatever b is. That's going to include the negative. Minus 4 times 2 times 5 all over 2 times 2. I'm going to simplify under that radical. X equals 4 plus or minus -4 quantity squared, that's going to be a positive 16. And remember, I taught y'all to do the minus 4ac all together, including the negative. -4 times 2 is -8. -8 times 5 is negative or minus 40, however you want to say it. All over 4. Are my solutions going to be real or imaginary? How you know?
Because it's going to be a negative in the thingy.
Exactly. Under my radical sign, I'm going to get a negative, right? It didn't say give me all real solutions. If it did, at this point, I could stop and say there aren't going to be any. But it wants all solutions. No real number is not an answer. So I know I'm going to have to simplify the whole thing. So x equals 4 plus or minus. 16 minus 40 is -24 all over 4. If you look at all of your answer choices, every single one of them have a 6 under the radical. So we know we can't leave it as -24. So let me simplify under that radical kind of over to the side. I don't have to rewrite everything for every little step I do. Figure out what that is. What's the square root of a negative? Imaginary, right? Square root of -1's I. And then for 24 times 6, we know 24 is not a perfect square. Does it have any perfect square factors? 4, right? So 4 times 6 gives me 24. What's the square root of 4? 2. So 2 times I is 2i. Square root of 6. Does 6 have any perfect square factors other than 1? No. So I'll come back to my problem. X equals 4 plus or minus 2i square root of 6 all over 4. If I separate this into two separate fractions, because 4 is being divided by 4 and 2i squared of 6 is being divided by 4. If I separate those into two separate fractions, can I reduce? Either or both? Yeah, I can. So if I can reduce either one, I need to. Now sometimes if you can only reduce one and not the other, sometimes they won't reduce, they'll just leave it all together. It just kind of depends, okay? Me personally, if something can be reduced, I like it reduced. It just depends on what answers they give you. So I'm going to separate this. X equals 4 divided by 4 plus or minus 2i square root of 6 divided by 4. What's 4 divided by 4? 1. Do I need to put that, or I just say they canceled? I have to put it because there's nothing else. If it was like 4a divided by 4, I just cancel the 4's and put a, right? But it's not, so I need that placeholder. If I add $1 to my bank account, it's going to change, or if I subtract $1. So it's not a 0, it's a 1, it's important. Plus or minus. Can I reduce the 6 and the 4? No, because 6 is under a radical, 4 is not. Can I reduce the 2i and the 4? Yeah. So think of it as like 2 4s. So 2 goes into 2 once, 2 goes into 4 twice. So you're left with 1i, or just I square root of 6 over 2. Could I rewrite that as one big fraction, put the whole thing over 2? Nope. I could if 1 was over 2, but it's not, okay? Now, if you look at your answer choices, A, there's no i's at all, so we know it can't be A. And for C, there's no i's at all, so it can't be C. B is -1, so it can't be that. So we're thinking it should be D, but let's just double check, make sure we didn't cross out something that we shouldn't have. 1 plus the square root of 6 over 2i, and 1 minus the square root of 6 over 2i. Does that mean the same thing as the way I wrote it with the I to the left of the radical? Yeah, I don't like it written like that, but they do, and that's okay. You can see it either way. So D is my answer. What time does Summerlinville ring?
Now.
Okay. So tomorrow, hopefully, we'll get through the rest of this. Bring it back. Don't lose it. If you're absent for the first part, make sure you go back and get it. Don't blow it off. FSA next week.